When people think about Euro 2004, they think about Greece's underdog triumph contrasted by a sobbing young Ronaldo. Some of my Portuguese viewers might reminisce on all the flags and agitation that the tournament brought to your then calm country. My international viewers pushing their 30s and 40s might recall the impressive rise of teenage Rooney, or when the Czech Republic were seen as genuine contenders for the title. There are many reasons to look back fondly on Euro 2004, but there's one crazy fact about that tournament that I bet you had no idea about. Latvia, one of the most insignificant countries in UEFA that you only pay attention when your team has to face them, qualified to that tournament and even upsetted the most successful nation in Euro Championship history. It was a remarkable and random feat that has never been matched again, so in this video we'll be diving deep into how they managed to qualify when it was much harder to do so, who were the stars that led them to glory, and why they failed to capitalize on their success. So first, as usual, let me give you some context. Prior to Euro 2004, Latvia had no history in football whatsoever. They failed to qualify for the 1938 World Cup, and after that, they were annexed by the Soviet Union. From 1940 until 1991, Latvia didn't compete as a recognized member of FIFA or UEFA. When they made a return, they were light years away from other established nations. Moreover, the moment they gained independence coincided with a period marked by the formation of several new nations in Europe. Several former Soviet and Yugoslav countries were now competing to qualify, which made it almost impossible for Latvia to stand out. It's not like they had any outstanding players who could carry them to an international tournament, much less a golden generation to rely on, so the 90s felt like a long walk in the desert for the Latvians. But then came the 2000s, a new decade, a new beginning where things remained exactly the same. I mean, what can I say? Do you know any Latvian player who rose to superstardom in the 2000s, or any club that even qualified for the Champions League? Nothing happened, except a managerial change. Nope, it wasn't a world-renowned coach joining the modest Latvia out of sheer goodwill. It was Aleksandrs Starkovs, an unknown to you and me, but a legendary manager in Latvia who conquered 14 league titles throughout his career. He wasn't a trailblazer, but he surely knew how to make the most out of modest squads, and that's exactly what his national team needed. Latvia were by no means favorites to qualify for Euro 2004. They weren't placed with any giant nation, but it would be extremely difficult to progress past such a balanced group with Sweden, Poland and Hungary. In fact, if Latvia could only win their matches against San Marino, I don't think anyone would have been that surprised. But Starkovs had a plan. During their 10 years of existence, Latvia were always unorganized and easy to beat. It wasn't like he could turn his players into attacking menaces, so he focused on what he could control in his tactical approach. Starkovs invested a lot in their defensive solidity. He basically parked the bus during the vast majority of the matches and built their attacking strategy around counterattacks. It was a pretty one-dimensional strategy, but it worked. In 8 matches, Latvia conceded only 6 goals. They beat Poland, Hungary and San Marino twice before wrapping up their qualifying stage with a massive underdog win over Sweden. These results weren't enough to top their group, but they were enough to earn them a place in the playoffs for the first time in Latvia's history. However, the draw wasn't really favorable for the 2004’s. Between them and a summer in Portugal was Turkey, a nation that had finished in 3rd place in the World Cup just 1 year before. Nonetheless, Latvia showed the same relentless spirit they had in qualifying and once again shocked the world, beating the Turks 1-0 at home. Though in the second leg, things didn't go well at all. Turkey dominated the match, and by the hour mark, they were already leading the tie on aggregate. Latvia were put in an uncomfortable spot. For the first time since Starkovs took over, it was up to them to take control of the match. Well, that obviously didn't happen, but thanks to a bizarre free kick and a huge defensive error by Turkey, Latvia quickly turned the tie around and then held on until the end of the match. The same old story kept repeating itself. The B-tier teams that had the obligation to beat Latvia didn't take them seriously, nor did they prepare for such solid defensive work, and they paid for it. Hungary, Poland, Sweden and now Turkey. Either way, it's also worth giving credit to a few individuals in that squad. First and foremost, their striker, Maris Verpakovskis. He was just 24 years old at the time, but he showed the composure of a much older striker. If it wasn't for his 6 goals, Latvia would have never made it to Euro 2004. Their keeper, Aleksandrs Starkovs, made many important saves and kept a clean sheet in both matches against Sweden. And lastly, Vitaly Jastafievs. Their leader on the pitch and one of the most capped players of all time, was responsible for keeping the team focused and composed throughout their matches. Now, could this three man help Latvia have a decent Euro run? At the time, I don't think anyone expected them to even get a point, considering the huge gap separating the 11 Wolves from their 3 group stage opponents. Sure, they showed resilience and solidity, but they were up against the 3 most lethal attacking sides in Europe: Germany, the Netherlands, and the Czech Republic. Germany was going through a transitional phase, but the talents of Miroslav Klose or Michael Ballack, for example, were miles ahead of those of Latvia. The Netherlands was in the early stages of their golden generation, with talents like Arjen Robben, Wesley Sneijder and Rafael van der Vaart pairing up with world-class athletes like Ruud van Nistelrooy and Giovanni van Bronckhorst. The Czech Republic were at their absolute peak, playing the most attractive football out of all teams in Europe, boosted by their current Ballon d'Or winner Pavel Nedved and many other stars like Milan Baros, Jan Koller and Tomáš Rosický. Ultimately, that was a difference maker in their clash against Latvia. Right before halftime, Verpakovskis put the Latvians ahead, which led many fans to believe that the dream would never end. However, the Czech pressure was too much for the Latvian defense and they eventually turned the match around with only 5 minutes left to play. It was a convincing performance from a team with no expectations, so in a way, it wasn't that surprising that Latvia managed to get a point from their fixture against Germany. Still, I'm sure no Latvian supporter left that match with a smile on their face, considering they were basically robbed by Mike Riley. Latvia had 3 clear penalties in their favor that were completely ignored by the referee, which would probably have earned them the 3 points and given them a much better chance in their final match against the Netherlands. But as things stood, Latvia was forced to win that last match, and ultimately, they couldn't do so. As a result, Latvia finished bottom of their group with only 1 point and 1 goal scored. It's underwhelming, considering that the same thing could have easily happened to Greece or Iceland in 2016, 2 nations that had run still talked about to this day. There's no greater example of how details make a difference than this Latvian campaign. If Latvia had held on against the Czech Republic for 5 more minutes, or if the ref had called any of the several blatant fouls in the box against Germany, Latvia could have made it to the quarterfinals and faced Sweden, a team they knew how to counter. Instead, they had a decent but forgettable run that they couldn't even use to build their future upon. Right after the tournament, their manager Aleksandrs Starkovs departed for Russia to coach Spartak Moscow, and everything the team had been able to build in the past 3 years was destroyed with their new manager Yuri Andreevs. Even though he had served as Starkovs' assistant during the Euros, Latvia's form dramatically collapsed under Yuris. In fact, it got so ridiculously bad that they lost to Liechtenstein. Eventually, the backbone of the team retired and younger prospects like Verpakovskis or Lysans never managed to get their careers off the ground, leading Latvia to fully embrace the role of punching bag in UEFA qualifiers. There haven't been any exciting Latvians coming up ever since, not even at the level of Verpakovskis, and honestly, I don't know if there ever will be. The fact is that Latvians aren't major football fans like the majority of Europe. They would much rather play ice hockey or basketball, 2 sports where they're actually good, so their pool of talent will always be limited compared to other nations. Every country needs a top player or a decent run in an international tournament to massively support the sport. That's just how the average fan operates, and Latvian football hasn't produced either. Ultimately, Latvia's qualification could be attributed to a solid offensive strategy coupled with most nations not taking them seriously. In this case, I would also have to add that luck played a big role, because they could have easily ended up in a much harder qualifying group. However, since they were so unfairly treated against Germany in the Euros, I think it's a bit unfair to cite luck as the main factor behind their success. And that is it for the video. What other forgotten campaigns like this one do you want me to make a video about? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to leave a like on this video as it helps push it to people who might have never seen it otherwise. Thank you for watching until the end. If you want to watch more international football stories like this one, click the playlist on the screen. I'll see you there.